So here we go. This is AP Dual Credit Lecture 4 for Intro to Memory. And if I'm not mistaken, for on-level psychology, it's the start of Lecture 3. So we're going to talk about memory here. We're going to talk about what is memory, where it comes from, all those particular things, how it's used, and how it can be easily manipulated. And again, memories are not always the same for everybody. You could have two people who experience the exact same thing, where one person's recollection of it was everything positive, the other person's recollection of it is everything negative. And it doesn't mean that one person's truthful and the other person's lying. It just means that they decided to encode, take in information themselves. It would be like two artists sitting down and drawing something where one person may see the light in a certain way and another person interprets it a completely different way. So that's what we're going to take a look at here as we look at studying and building of memories. Now, what memory is it's what we learn over time. It's extraordinarily important because without a memory, we'd be a stranger to ourselves. Every time we woke up, we'd have to learn everything again, language again, what smells are again, how to get to work again, all these particular things. So memories are very important. There's a couple of types. There's episodic memory where we remember events or episodes of our lives. There are semantic memories where we remember facts. There's procedural memories where we remember how to do things. And sometimes, excuse me, memories are somewhat of a combination of all of these things. Now, unlike a picture that you may take or a photocopy or whatever, a memory is personally constructed by us, which means that every time we go back to it, it ends up getting changed a little bit. If I had a memory of my childhood and I was angry about my childhood, feeling my parents didn't treat me right, I go back and I want to look for every sort of example of them not treating me right. So I'm going to take that memory out. I'm going to put a lot of negativity on it. If I am longing for my childhood and I wish things were like they were before and whatnot, I'm going to go back to that memory and sort of paint it with a rose colored brush and everything else and maybe make it better than what it really was. So again, it depends a lot on how this memory was made, and it depends on how we take the memory out and we put it back away. So again, two people could have a totally different memories of the exact same event, and neither one is necessarily lying. Lying is when you know what the truth is. You absolutely know what the truth is, but you choose to give a deceit, a deception of what you know to be true. Whereas a false memory just means that either you encoded it wrong, you put it in wrong, it wasn't the way it was supposed to, or when you go back and recall it, you're not bringing back all the pieces that you necessarily would need to in order to make that, in fact, a proper memory. As the sun is coming in here, very bright. Uh, Here's one of the ways that I like to describe memories. For those of you in AP Dual Credit, we talked about the neuron, and we talked about traveling across the neuron again and again and again. And as you go up to the cerebellum and you do the same thing again and again and again, that eventually what happens is that connection becomes pretty good. So when you first put a memory away, you put it in a particular place, you go to it one particular time, and it's like traveling across a big grassy field. So the first time I put a memory away and I go from my hippocampus to where I place it in my brain, whatnot, I can see a little bit of, oh yeah, that's the way I went last time, but it still sort of blends in with everything else. As I continue to go back to that memory again and again and again, then the grass starts to get worn out and I can start to see a pathway, a very clear pathway. And then as I do it again and again and again, the pathway becomes even more clear. And then if I continue to do it, it becomes like a highway and everything else. Now, this picture that I use here as an example, let me explain the purpose of that. My wife and I dated originally when we were in college. And then when we sort of went away from each other, I still had very fond memories of her. And she kind of defined what love was and everything else. And every girl that I met didn't quite measure up to her. And I spent the next 20 years sort of comparing everyone that I ever dated to this woman. She went off, on the other hand, and again got married and had multiple children and whatnot. So as I'm sitting back and reflecting on our previous relationship, she really wasn't doing it as much because she couldn't possibly hold her marriage together and do that and be a mother to the kids and everything else. So as I would look at every girl and I would compare, I would be going down this pathway, and my memories of our relationship were very, very clear. Hers were more like this. It was sort of covered up. She didn't visit it that much. I mean, there were sort of little things that would remind her of me, but for the most part, she sort of covered that up and whatnot because of her marriage, et cetera, et cetera. Now, when we get back together, some 22, 23 years later, my memories of us being together were very, very clear. Hers were, oh, we were kind of good friends in college, blah, 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 blah. And it was more than that. We talked about children. We talked about getting married. It was a lot deeper than that. So her and I had sort of different memories. And the reason why is because my memories were a little bit more clear because I had revisited them. And again, I could have tainted them as well, making them better than what they were or whatnot. And her memories were kind of vague, kind of covered up. It also had a lot to do with the fact that she was suffering from depression at the time. So there were sort of these little blanks where she didn't quite encode everything correctly. So the interesting thing about this is I had a clear memory of our relationship. Hers was a little bit more vague. And as a matter of fact, I actually saved some letters, had her look at the letters that she wrote back in college, and she really, truly couldn't recognize them because the grass had sort of grown up, and it was very bizarre for her. Now, 10 years after that, if you ask me about our relationship in college, I'm over here because I don't think about it that much. I'm not in love with this 18-year-old girl. I'm in love with this, 49, 50-year-old woman, though I'm not supposed to say her age. And when somebody showed up with this on Facebook about a year ago, this is a picture of me and her back in college. I don't remember that event. I don't remember that event at all. I can kind of tell where it was. I do remember that we played multiple games of Pictionaries with friends and whatever else, but I remember that tie. I remember that jacket. I even remember that top and her wearing it, but I can't recall that particular moment because I haven't gone back to it. So the grass has sort of gone over the top of it. So a little something here on how memory works if you want to go back and take a read of it. So again, memory varies from person to person. It's not a sign of intelligence. You could have very intelligent people that can't remember any names. And you could have some people that have a very, very deficient level of intelligence, but they have amazing memories. There was a story of two ladies who happened to have a mental retardation, but they were also autistic, and they could remember every meal that they've had since, birth. And if you said, what did you have for breakfast on August 13th, 1972, they could tell you what they had for breakfast. And you could check it because they kept a diary of every meal that they ever had. So again, it's not necessarily a sign of intelligence. Our memories are very selective. We tend to recall events that are unique to us when it comes to our memory. And you'll hear me say this again and again. I love me some me. The more it's about me, the more likely I am to remember it. We tend to remember good news as better than what it was. We tend to remember bad news as worse than what it was, because a lot of times if I'm labeling it as good or if I'm labeling it as bad, I also have to have that justification to label it a certain way. So it's almost like I'm arguing with my own subconscious when I do that. So when your parents tell you things like, when you're complaining about high school and they say it's the greatest years of their lives, it's because they're only remembering the good times of high school. They've sort of repressed or put away that memory of not preparing for their tests, not having their project done, whatever else the case may be. So again, memory is fluid. It's constantly moving. It's constantly in motion and all these other things. So it's in no way perfect. So again, two people, different memories, doesn't necessarily mean one of them is lying. They're kind of a three-step process of memory. You got to look at memory like a computer. So when you get a brand new computer right out of the box, whatever else, unless it's pre-programmed, it's kind of a big blank memory thing. So what you have to do is you've got to type into your computer and you have to program things. You have to put things in it. As a human being, we're taking 2 billion bits of information every second. And then we have to decide, is this worth saving? Or can I just sort of throw that away? You know, when somebody is, when you're driving to school, was somebody behind you at the corner of Skinner and Spring Cypress? I don't know, maybe I assume so. And you might have even looked at the person, but there was no reason to remember that person because it was just a car and everything else. There was nothing to necessarily put it away. If it's not a safety threat, if it's not worth saving, if it's not necessarily going to be used later, it just sort of disappears. I don't need it. I don't need to remember whether my friend had their shoes tied this morning or not. That's not going to help me down the road in life or whatever. So again, when I'm taking in 2 billion bits of information, I have to decide what's worth saving and what's can I just throw away. Because a lot of stuff I don't pay attention to. There's no reason to pay attention to. There's no reason to pay attention to my sleeve on my shoulder right now and go, ooh, is it still there? I'm just going to assume it's still there. I don't need to remember what my sleeve felt like at 4:02 as opposed to 4:01. So a lot of things that we encode and we take in, there's really sort of no reason to remember it. But the things that we do need to remember, what we need to do is we need to put them away. Because if I don't put it away so that I can go back and get it, it's kind of useless. So this is what's known as storage of memory. It's the stuff that we sort of immediately decide to feel, touch, taste, whatever, which could be a fraction of a second. It could be stuff that we're actually paying attention to, which could be 20 to 30 seconds in short-term memory, the time that somebody gives you a phone number so you can dial it and then talk and then you forget whatever that phone number was, or it could last a lifetime. Our memories are never full. So again, I've got to take this stuff and I got to program it. I got to put it into my computer so I can get it a little bit later. And then I have to be able to go back and get it, which is retrieval. Because if I can't go back and get my memory, it's like my memory never existed. It never occurred. If I save a song on my computer, but I can't play that song, it doesn't do me any good. So even though I may have the memory, I don't know how to get to the memory. And a lot of times we mistakenly get to a memory. People with post-traumatic stress disorder, when, you know, if you got into a car accident at one point and the screech of a wheel take you back to a memory you haven't thought about in years. A perfume of somebody can take you back to a memory. Going back to your old elementary school can take you back to a memory. So there's a lot of different ways that we can retrieve something. But if I can't retrieve it, it does me no good. If I don't store it, I can never retrieve it. And if I don't encode it, I can never store it nor retrieve it. So that's kind of a three-step process that we have there. So when it comes to encoding information, there's a lot of ways that we encode. You think of all the senses that you have. You know, right now I'm lecturing to you and you're hearing what I have to say. And at the same time, not only that, you're reading. You're taking a look at this stuff. And some of you may be moving your hand and writing things down. So kinesthetically, you're picking it up. You're seeing it. You're hearing it. You're doing that. And also you're going, where have I heard this stuff before? And you're teaming it with a memory that you already have. For example, when I say the word information, you know, you're going, what does information mean? Where have I heard that before? And let me tie it into this new thing. And so you're making all these connections. The more connections you can make, the better the memory, which is why I'm always giving you stories and giving you analogies. It's like this. Oh, then I can make that connection. So when I was a kid, it was like when I did that. If it's something meaningful, you're more likely to remember it. And again, I love me some me. Words used to describe somebody else, we tend to forget that someone else, it's their journey, but somebody says the same thing about us, we're more likely to remember it because it's about us, which again is a reason why psychology should be a relatively accessible class to do well in, because this is all about you. This is about you. This is about your memory and all these other things. It can be manipulated quite a bit depending on what we're looking for. People could be sort of, you know, when you go, why did you say that? I didn't say that. No, you said it here. No, I didn't say that. And then do I believe the person who says that they didn't say that, or do I trust my thought that they in fact did say that? And we'll talk about that down the road when we get to things like gaslighting and whatever, where, you know, some people will try to manipulate someone else's memory. Because again, every time I pull the memory out, it becomes a little bit different. You know, if with somebody and we're talking about a party that we were at and they were like, hey, I remember you were wearing that blue shirt, and you go, I wasn't wearing a blue shirt, I was wearing a red shirt. Because sworn I was wearing a red shirt. No, man, it's a blue shirt. Blue shirt. Okay, now I go back and I change my memory from wearing a red shirt to a blue shirt, which doesn't seem like a big big deal. But if I go back to that memory 10, 15, 20 times and I keep changing little details, pretty soon I'm going to have a memory of only changed things, and I'm losing the original memory. What was your attitude going in? That could have a lot to do with the memory. Is your attitude that I'm looking for something great, or is my attitude is I'm just trying to survive this day? That has a lot to do with it. You know, when I watch the show The Bachelor, which again, I apologize for doing that, but when I watch The Bachelor and you have two people come back from the exact same date, and one person's like, oh my God, it's amazing. I could see myself having kids with this person and everything else. The other person comes back, I really didn't see a connection, because they were looking for two different things. And so again, they had the exact same experience, but you have two different people who encoded different things into their memory. Now, to show you this to be true, and I really hope that this works here within this video, because a lot of times when I do this and then I put it up on YouTube, YouTube sort of, they have a little algorithm or whatever, and they'll put this down for copyright reasons. But just try to do what they're asking you to do here, assuming that it works. Here we go.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Okay, so how many passes does the team in white? 1, 2, 3, keep going. Okay, and then you pause there. You come up with your number. Fantastic. Here we go.
Is 13.
13.
But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Rewind. Now ignore the ball. Ignore the ball. Paying attention over here. There he is. And then he works his way across. Now, to show you that that's not manipulated by me, if we go back to the beginning of the video here, you see, excuse me, that the bear is right there. But again, we don't encode it because we're told white shirt, ball, white shirt, ball, white shirt, ball. So when we see black bear, we don't catch it. And again, for those of you guys who we went through sensation and perception, this sort of attention blindness, if I never pay attention to it, I never encode it. And if I never encode it, I don't have a memory of this bear. There's no reason to have a memory of the bear. I was too busy encoding white shirt, ball, and then the number 13 to go with that as well. Okay. Let's see, just sort of pause here. I'm gonna pause this so I can get to the next one. Hang on. Okay. Another example is this right here. You take a look at these 9 different stop signs. And out of these 9 different stop signs, one of them is actually 100% accurate. The others all have a little bit of a problem with them. If you take a look at it, you'll notice that it's this one right here that is accurate. The rest of them off just a little bit. But all 9 of them, it's a little bit confusing, because if any of those 9 signs were up, you would still stop. You would still go, okay, it's red, it's an octagon, it says the word stop, whatever. The fact that it's, you know, this font rather than a Roman numeral or a Comic Sans or whatever, that's not enough to get you to sort of change because of a technicality or anything like that. So we don't encode all these little details because we don't need the details. As long as it's got 8 sides to it, it's red, and it says the word stop, I'm going to treat them all the same. So a lot of times we don't take in the little details of these, which is why some people remember very trivial things and other people don't, because they're encoding things a little bit different. So the more that we're encoding and the more ways that we're encoding, the more likely I am to remember. The different types of encoding that we have, it means that our ability to remember it would be a little bit different. For example, semantic encoding is where I take a word, words told to me, whatever, and can I look at the meaning of the word and also tie it to something I already know. So that's one type of encoding. An acoustic encoding is something that I hear. Okay, so I could read and then I could also hear it. Here's where a lot of us get in trouble with just reading things. If you just read a book, you open up a book and you're just reading it, very often we'll find ourselves going through reading, knowing that the word is being said into my brain, and then we'll think to ourselves, I can't remember the last time I was paying attention. So a lot of times we have to go back and we have to figure out when we were paying attention. This is why some people will read out loud to themselves, because if I read out loud to myself, not only am I seeing the words semantically, but I'm also hearing the words. I'm also making my lips move and process the words. All right, so that makes it a little bit better. And then if I also visually imagine what's going on in the reading as well, that's going to make me remember it even a little bit more. So if I can do all these at the same time, that's what's called parallel processing, which is also why I encourage you to write this while I talk about it, because the moving of the hand and also hearing the words and seeing the pictures, it's more ways that you process it. The more ways that you process it, the more that you're putting the memories around in your brain, and the more memories that I put around in my brain, the easier it's going to be to find it. You know, if I try to find one memory, it's a needle in a haystack. But if I put this memory in 20 different places, it's going to be a little bit easier to find if I can tie it to, okay, here's things about psychology. Okay, here's things about my childhood. So this is about psychology, but it's also about my childhood, but it's also about my current relationship. The more files I can put it away in, the better. And this is what's referred to as effortful processing. Effortful processing is when we take information and we tie it into something I already know. For example, if somebody said fire engine, okay, fire engine is a type of vehicle, as is a truck, as is an ambulance, so I put it in my vehicle file. And it also happens to be what you fight fires with in houses. So fires in houses are attached to that, so those go in those files. Also happens to be the color red. Red goes into the files with all my colors and other things that are red, like flowers over here. And then other things that are red here, like sunrises and sunsets, and clouds aren't red, but they're in that same file. And fruits and vegetables that are red as well. I can make all those ties to it. You know, if I hear a new song, let's say I'm a fan of Sting, and Sting were to release a new album. Okay, that'd be pretty easy for me to remember his songs because I have a big file of music from Sting in my brain, and it's pretty easy. If it's some new artist, an artist I've never heard of before, it's going to be a little bit harder for me to get to that file because I already don't have a file that's pre-made for that person. So that song may not register for me as well as something from Sting, because if I hear something from Sting, that's going to remind me when I saw him in concert in 2011, it'll remind me when I saw him in concert in 1985, that'll remind me when I wanted to go see him in concert in Vegas recently, but that got canceled because of COVID. But I've got a lot of Sting memories. The fact that my wife is a big fan of Sting, the fact that we went to the 2011 concert together. I've got all these different files of Sting, so when I hear his music, it's going to make a little bit more sense to me. A lot of times when we process things, we process them automatically. That's most of our processing because we don't think a lot. We don't take every little thing in that we're doing. If I asked you what you had for dinner last night, you could probably recall what you had for dinner, but at no point as you were eating dinner the night before were you thinking, I need to process this, I need to remember this just in case I'm asked about it. So again, these non-declarative implicit memories that sort of happen automatically, they can involve space, time, frequency, anything like that. If you lose your keys, I don't know where my keys are because a lot of times we just go home, we throw our keys. So then what I have to do is I have to go, what do I remember? I remember coming home yesterday. I remember I wore these pants. Maybe they're in that pocket. I remember I wore this jacket. Maybe it's in that pocket. Use this purse. Maybe it's in that purse. I walked into the doorway, and then I walked into the kitchen. Maybe it's in the kitchen. And then we have to take what we do remember it to try to tie it to that new thing. Oh, that's right. It's wherever that got me to that particular memory. So again, sometimes that's why you need to have like a regular spot for your keys or whatever. But a lot of times we never take the time to encode it. And then sometimes we encode things without trying, singing along with a song that you've heard on the radio multiple times. You never tried to remember the lyrics, but you find yourself sort of singing along with it. When you learn a second language and you're saying that second language, you're speaking in that second language, you don't necessarily turn off your native tongue, but you sort of process both, and you're doing a little bit of parallel processing. I can listen to this, but at the same time, listen to that. And a lot of that has to do with when we originally remembered it. So now we talked about memory has to be encoded, it has to be stored, and it has to be retrieved. Well, there's 3 different stages of memory. The first stage of memory is what's called sensory memory. Sensory memory is everything that's happening to you within a fraction of a second. part of your clothes that's pressing against your skin, every feeling in my vocal cord as I speak, everything I hear, the little vibration of the air conditioner, all these things, the sun on my eye right at this particular moment, everything going on. And then my brain has to decide, is it worth paying attention to? Is it of importance? Is it a threat? All these other things. Now, if I decide to pay attention to it, then it goes into my short-term memory. My short-term memory is my conscious memory. It's things that I'm actually paying attention to. When I read this sentence, we take what we already know and combine it with what we are currently experiencing. Okay, I need to know that so I can write it down. We take what we know. And it's about 7 to 9 items I can pay attention to for about 30 seconds. I'm not going to read this entire page and then go write it down. I'm going to take a few words at a time and sort of put it together. Again, when I'm reading the PowerPoint, you look at the letters, combine them. If I see the word reading, I know it's reading because I've seen it a million times. So I'm taking this new stuff and I'm tying it to what I already know. And again, this is also why a lot of us can't multitask, because when we're trying to multitask, I'm trying to do this, then do this at the same time. And I'm doing both a little bit worse. When I try to do two things at the same time, I'm doing multiple encoding, and we tend to make those mistakes. And then the last type of memory is what's called long-term memory. And this could last from half an hour to a couple of hours to the rest of our lives. And this is something that we put away in our little storehouse, and we tend to go back to and use. The more we go back to a memory, the more likely we are to keep the memory. The more often I type, the easier it is to continue to type, because that's a skill that I do again and again. The more times I go back and I think about my high school graduation, if I think about my high school graduation every time I witness you guys graduate, then that's going to be a very, very clear memory. But then if I don't think about it, it's going to start to fade. So again, a few hours, lifetime can be either way. So again, sensory memory is 2 billion bits of information every second. Then it goes into short-term memory, where we tend to rehearse and repeat things. And then we encode it and we put it away into long-term memory. So again, sensory memory, fraction of a second, hold on to it really, really quick before it disappears, and then it just sort of goes away. Now, two types of sensory memory. One is iconic, which is our visual memory. When people talk about having a photographic memory, we all have a photographic memory, but it's fleeting. I'm taking a photograph right now, and now I just replace it with this photograph. I just replace it with this photograph. And this is why a lot of times we don't notice changes, because we take in this whole image, and then if one letter changes or whatever, we're not necessarily going to notice it. But iconic memory is what we see. And again, for a tenth of a second, we've got amazing memory, because my eyes are darting all over the place. So I'm taking a picture of this, 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 and I'm putting them all together. And every time I blink, it doesn't seem like I'm blinking, because my memory has the picture still there as I blink. So it seems very, very smooth. When I'm moving, if you've ever held up a phone to take a video, you're like, and then you watch it, you're like, wow, that's really shaky. My eyes are darting all over the place, but what my brain is doing, it's putting together a solid picture of that. Sperling did an example of this, where he flashed something in front of people and he wanted to see what their iconic memory was like. So if I were to flash this for you, most of us see the QL5 because it's at the top. Whoops, go back here. QL5, we see it at the top because that's how we're used to processing things. Few of us will come up with a 7 or a V or the 3 or the X. We sort of go QL5. Now that could be because of the coloring, but it's also because we naturally process things in this Western society from the left to the right. If I did this with a bunch of Arabic students, they might have said 5LQ. If I did this with a bunch of Chinese students, they may have said Q3T, because of the way that they're used to processing those particular things. And we did this when we talked about sensation and perception, that sort of fleeting memory that we have. If you look at the dot, oops, let me take that away. Keep staring at this little dot right there. Let me take that away. Then what's happening, as we talked about with sensation and perception, your cones are getting really, really tired. Your green cones are getting tired. Your red cones are going, when do I get to work? Your yellow cones are getting tired. Your blue cones are going, when do I get to work? And then your black rods are going, okay, we're being used enough. When are we going to flash something else up? So if I keep staring at the dot, stare at the dot, stare at the dot, then I take this away. And then what you have is the after image there. And that after image, a little tenth of a second, represent your iconic memory. Now, your echoic memory, and this is the last thing I think we have to cover here, your echoic memory are things that you hear and you sort of hang on to, words that sort of hang up into the sky. You know, if your parents are talking to you and you're not really paying attention to them, and they tell you to do something, you're like, okay, and they're like, what did I tell you to do? You told me to take out the trash. And they get upset. Oh, well, you weren't actively listening to me. And you're even amazed that you could come up with that because, again, things just sort of hang in our brain for a little bit like an echo, 3 or 4 seconds. Even if I'm not paying attention, we can sort of still hook onto that. And especially if it's about us. And this is what's known as the cocktail party phenomenon. Cocktail party phenomenon means I could be having a conversation with this person over here. Someone's having a conversation over there. Someone's having a conversation over there. Somebody's having a conversation over there. And I can basically stop paying attention to the person I'm talking to and sort of focus on this other one or that other one or that other one. And I have this ability to sort of tune things out and only tune in things I want to hear. But on top of that, what happens is if I'm talking to somebody over here, then suddenly somebody over there goes, hey, it's like when Porter, and I'm like, there it goes, because someone said my name. Because when people say our name, that gets our attention because we think it's either beneficial for us or it's to keep us out of danger or whatever. So we're going to pay attention to our name, which is part of the cocktail party phenomenon. So there are some other things on memory if you want to take a look at that. And that should wrap up lecture 1 of memory. Should get you all the way through it.